Hello, thank you for joining me. In the next few minutes, we'll be exploring the components and best practices of authentic assessment, along with some examples. We'll also discuss the Brightspace tools that make it easy to set up authentic assessments in our courses, how Brightspace compares to universal design for learning principles and accessibility in general, how evidence-based learning practices fit into these assessments, and how we can share ideas, questions, and examples going forward. My name is Judith Littlejohn. I'm the Director of Online Learning at SUNY, which is the State University of New York, Genesee Community College in Batavia, New York, which is just a little southeast of Niagara Falls. I've been working in online learning for almost, but not quite 20 years as an advisor, an instructional designer, and director. I've also been teaching online for a dozen years or so as an adjunct. I've created a website that supports this presentation. It's called beyondanotherpaper.org. And I encourage you, let's see, hang on. I encourage you to take a look at it for resources and engagement. Here's the QR code. I'll show it again toward the end of the presentation in case you weren't ready to grab it now. Okay, so authentic assessments gauge a student's ability to apply their knowledge and skills to real world, I say that like real world in air quotes, situations and tasks that mimic the challenges they might encounter in the workplace. I find this definition limiting because as a community college employee, I know that my students live in the real world now, and they need additional skills such as problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, decision-making, and communication in order to land a job. I also believe that general education courses, such as the history courses I teach, or any communication courses, any social sciences, foreign language, and so on, have value and can enhance an individual's life experience and well-being. Students need to be able to relate to their general education courses in a way that personalizes their learning experience and highlights the soft skills and community benefiting talents they bring to the table. This is why I edit the definition of authentic assessment for all and implement a variation of these assessments in my courses. Authentic assessments start with the real world or personal context, which challenges the student to think through the solution. The student must do it. That is, they must work through the problem and solve the challenge, transferring their academic knowledge to the challenge at hand. As the instructor, then I provide feedback to the students and they can reflect on what they did and on the feedback and try again if needed. This give and take effort allows the student to explore and experiment. If their solution or response to the challenge is way off base, my feedback can steer them back. The Brightspace learning management system supports these assessment efforts. It's user-friendly, there are communication and collaboration tools, it supports a wide range of format types for text and multimedia. I can provide feedback in a variety of ways, from written feedback to video or spoken. The system is cloud-based and secure, so accessing the content is rarely problematic. I find Brightspace refreshing after the LMS that we left behind 2 years ago. Content in Brightspace is inherently accessible if you use the built-in templates and tools. This is wonderful because we know that in the US, 65% of students who had accommodations for disabilities while they were in high school do not follow up and apply for those accommodations when they're in college. When we know our content is accessible, those students can use their screen readers, magnifiers, any other adaptive or assistive devices that they need to access their course materials without any problems. Accessibility works hand in hand with universal design for learning so that our courses can be inclusive and designed for all of our students to succeed. I've included a list of authentic assessment types to help get ideas flowing. Depending on the learning objectives your students must meet, they can create sales pitches, podcasts, posters, blog posts, songs, poems, social media campaigns. They can write policies or run fundraisers, conduct interviews, solve problems, create infographics, video presentations, and experiments, whatever works for your course and your content. When students work on these assessments, they see the relevance of their work to the course content and hopefully to their own learning goals. They employ their critical thinking skills and produce genuine work as opposed to searching for something someone else created. I think of it as a more holistic evaluation, especially when the students are given choices and some input to the assessment process. These assessments further our goals for diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice because each student is demonstrating their own learning progress in a personal way, which results in increased engagement and active learning. Together, these pieces improve metacognition as students reflect on what they've learned and why, how it relates to their course, and how they can best demonstrate their knowledge and skills. Encouraging students to think about their learning and improve on their work helps build that metacognition. To put all this together in Brightspace, start with one of the course learning objectives that you'd like to formally assess. Guide your students to help you, or create your own real-world scenario for them to consider and provide clear instructions for them to follow. Give the students as much choice as possible while meeting the learning outcome. Encourage them to select or create multimedia elements as appropriate, and definitely encourage them to reflect on their process and their output. Consider collaboration from the start. You can either have students work in pairs or groups, or provide feedback to one another later on if you want them to do independent projects. Be sure to provide a grading rubric so the students know exactly what you are looking for in their work. The Brightspace rubric tool makes this easy for you. And of course, encourage students to create accessible content, or at least raise awareness of the importance of accessibility and model it by using the accessible Brightspace tools. And for yourself, it's important to plan your time so that you can give them feedback as soon as possible so that your students can reflect and try again if needed. To follow through, you could have entrepreneurial students create plans for their own business and have them submit the plans in the Brightspace assignment tool. Or health studies students can work through patient case studies using quizzes to gauge their knowledge, and discussion boards to share what they've learned and to find out what their peers have worked on. Business or social media students can create marketing campaigns in groups and utilize multimedia for videos and posts. Pre-law and criminal justice students can debate ethical dilemmas on discussion boards. And students, any students can share posters, infographics, share them right on the discussion boards, and they could share their research that way in a graphic form. I use discussion boards for blog posts in my classes because it's an easy way for students to create posts with embedded images, and then they can share all their content that way. So I have a few examples here of what my students did this past spring. The first one is from one of the last discussions in my early American history course. The students have to find something in their home or in the town they live in or in a local library that relates to something we studied in the course. They share these on a discussion board where they can embed images and hyperlinks. And so this is an example of this is an example from a student in Rochester, New York, who found an old building that housed the Cunningham factory where hearses were made for the Civil War. And the same student also shared a picture below that of the house that suffragette Susan B. Anthony lived in Rochester. Next, in modern world civilizations, I have students connect their breakfast foods to the Columbian Exchange so that they get a sense of the global impact their eating choices have. In this example, one of my Japanese students described her entire avocado. In this example, one of my Japanese students describes her entire avocado toast ingredient list. I've included the part she wrote about the avocado originating in Mexico and traveling with the British to Australia, then gaining popularity in Africa. The third example is from the same class. The students had to research consumption in the 1700s and connect them to a popular item. This student created a PowerPoint presentation about coffee And she started it with a table of contents, which I loved. And she also included a slide on how coffee impacts her daily life now, and then the long-term impact of the coffee trade. The final example is from the US history course again. A student wrote a dialogue between two characters who discussed some of the laws in 19th century America, particularly the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, and how people felt about or reacted to them. This was probably the most creative post I've ever seen, and most of the students in the course commented on it and enjoyed it. Also, I made a note on this slide because I used to dread grading the standard 5-page research papers every semester. And now when I open an assignment and see something creative like this, I'm actually smiling while grading. So my own engagement has increased as a result of the students' work. I added a handful of challenges and solutions next because if we were in the same room together right now, these are some questions you might have. A common challenge in asynchronous courses is the lack of student engagement. Matching course assessments to relevant scenarios and engaging students with multimedia and interactive content can help with this, as can collaborating with others. If you're concerned about your students' time management skills, be sure to provide them with timelines and course schedules so they can plan ahead. Post your due dates in the course calendar and use intelligent agents and announcements to remind them of upcoming due dates. I have agents that start about 36 hours before assignments are due to remind the students that they haven't completed them yet. I think it helps to keep them on schedule. And if you're worried about academic honesty, designing assessments that engage students in critical thinking and problem solving in a personal way helps to mitigate that. If students connect to their work on a personal level, they tend to do the work themselves. A wide range of diversity in a class can be both exciting and daunting. To help meet everyone's needs, offer as many flexible options as you can, following those universal design for learning principles. This way, students can select topics they find relevant, and they can demonstrate their learning in creative ways that they will feel more connected to. In my classes, the students are allowed to demonstrate their learning in the way they are most comfortable with, as long as they meet the learning objectives and cite their sources. I find that the more creative projects take them longer, but they're proud of them. And generally they include annotated bibliographies to clarify where each source was used. Also, reworking your courses to include these assessments can be challenging. So reach out to colleagues or instructional designers on your campus if you need help. Break large assessments up into parts that can be scaffolded over several modules to keep them manageable, and use your Brightspace tools to your advantage. Don't overwhelm yourself. Start a little bit at a time, and within a couple of semesters, you'll see a change in your students' engagement. On the website I mentioned earlier, and I'll give you the QR code for that again in a minute, you'll find deeper explanations of some of what we just discussed here, as well as several resources to dive into further research. Another thing I want to point out about the website is the Padlet you can use to share ideas and examples on. Please feel welcome to share. If you download your own set of these slides, you can click on that image of the Padlet to go right to it, and the URL is in the image alt text as well. So to wrap up, authentic assessments have value. They prepare students for success. Brightspace tools facilitate engaging and effective assessments. Student engagement is central to authenticity. They are honest in personal contexts. Authentic assessment and Brightspace together encompass digital accessibility, universal design for learning, and reflective metacognitive practice. And as higher ed changes, guide your students to be the change. Thank you for listening, and please feel free to reach out to me. And I'll be in Toronto in July, so I hope to see you there. Thank you.